Our morning routines have all changed. But the thing is, for too many kids across Canada, going hungry in the morning is still a reality. That's why at Canada Dry Mott's, we've brought back the Buy a Cup, Give a Cup program. For every Mott's Fruit Stations cup you buy, we'll donate a cup made with unsweetened real fruit to Breakfast Club of Canada. And we'll keep donating up to 500,000 times. That's a lot of mornings made a little better with the help of Mott's Fruit Stations, Breakfast Club of Canada, and you.
This is a CBC podcast. In April, this country mourned the victims of a deadly rampage in Nova Scotia.
To everyone who lost a loved one, Canada is mourning with you. To the communities that are grieving, we are here for you. You are not alone.
And even though we can't pretend to understand the pain you're in, we are here to try to find a way to help shoulder some of the burden of this grief.
To my dear Nova Scotia, we are there with you in the deepest of ways. I want to play a tune for you that I chose because of a beautiful performance I saw a couple of days ago, played by one of the victims, Emily Tuck. She was a fiddler. So I thought I would unite myself to her performance and play this tune for all the souls that lost their lives.
It has been 7 months since 22 people were killed in that mass shooting, the deadliest in Canada's history. It started in the small village of Portapique, and the shooter was wearing a police uniform, driving a replica of a police car. His rampage went on for more than 13 hours until the RCMP shot and killed him. The general public was, for the most part, kept in the dark. An investigation by the CBC's The Fifth Estate reveals new details of that night and what law enforcement knew. 13 Deadly Hours is being presented tonight on The Fifth Estate. Gillian Findlay is a host on that program. Gillian, good morning.
Hi, good morning, Matt.
Let's go back to the night of Saturday, the 18th of April. The RCMP said that they arrived in Portapique around 10:30. What do we know about what they knew at that time?
You know, Matt, it is remarkable 7 months later how little we still know about any of that. The police won't even answer the most basic questions. How many officers were deployed that night? What did they do exactly when they got there? When did reinforcements arrive? None of that has been put on the public record by the RCMP. In fact, the very few details we have learned have come from media organizations like the CBC taking the RCMP to court to actually force disclosures. So it's been very difficult to piece this together. But the one thing I think is on the record is that sometime as the night of the 18th wore into the morning of the 19th, the Sunday, we do know that the police came to understand that the shooter they were looking for was in fact impersonating one of them, as you say, posing as an RCMP officer and driving a mocked-up replica RCMP cruiser.
In your investigation, you raised questions about when the RCMP learned that information. What can you tell us?
Well, from the beginning, the RCMP said that they didn't learn that until early Sunday morning. And they said that they learned it when the shooter's partner emerged from hiding. You might recall this whole incident seems to have started with the shooter, Gabriel Wortman, assaulting his partner earlier in the evening. She managed to escape, hid, and then emerged around 6 o'clock Sunday morning to say she'd been hiding in the woods all night. The RCMP have said that it was only that when she emerged that they discovered significant details from her. A, the confirmation of who the shooter was that they were likely looking for, that would be Gabriel Wortman, and B, that he was indeed in possession of a fully marked replica cruiser. So they describe it, and it clearly was very critical information that, as I say, that they claim they didn't know till daybreak on Sunday. What we discovered in our investigation is, in fact, 8 hours before that, on Saturday night, the RCMP interviewed a witness on the scene who essentially told them the same information.
Oh, wow. Who was the witness?
Well, it's interesting. He's never been identified publicly, and but I can tell you he was a resident of Portapique who saw the fires that night and went out to see what was going on. And it was when he did that, he encountered a man that he recognized as his neighbor, Gabriel Wortman. He was shot and injured by him, and it was as he was speeding away from the danger that he ran into what appears to be the very first RCMP officer arriving on the scene. Now, this man, this witness, wouldn't do an interview with us, but he did speak to a private investigator. And in an audio tape that we obtained of that conversation, he makes it clear what he told that RCMP officer at 10:26 Saturday night, including identifying Gabriel Wortman as the shooter.
We have a little excerpt of that witness. Let's have a listen.
He went and grabbed his radio and radioed exactly what I told him. I think I literally said, I'm 90% sure it's my neighbor Gabe, and he had an RCMP officer, or RCMP car. I knew he had those cars, but I'd never seen them badged. It was a replica RCMP car.
So that's a little bit hard to make out, but in case you missed it, what he said was he identified the shooter as his neighbor. He called him Gabe Wortman, and he was said that he was driving what he described as a fully marked replica police car, and that when he told the officer radioed that in right away. So the important part of all of this, Matt, is that he's very specific. He says this took place at 10:26 Saturday night.
And so police get this information. What did they do with it then?
Well, that's obviously the very important question, and one that the RCMP still refuses to answer. It seems they must have taken him seriously, because we have seen internal police bulletins that are circulated to police forces throughout Nova Scotia that night. And just after 1 o'clock Sunday morning, so early, the RCMP did identify Wortman as a possible suspect. And they also said that he was associated with an old white police car. That bulletin was later updated. The information became, in fact, it was a fully marked police car, and crucially, they said they didn't know where he was at that point. He could be anywhere in the province, is what they told other police officers. That's not what they were telling the public.
What was the RCMP telling the public about what was going on that night?
The first time the RCMP alerted the public to anything was at 11:32. They sent out a tweet, and this has been the source of much criticism, as I'm sure you remember. But that tweet simply said that they were investigating a firearms complaint in Portapique and warning people in that area to stay inside. It wasn't until 8 o'clock Sunday morning that they tweeted again, and then at that point they simply said their investigation was ongoing, the danger was still confined to Portapique. So when they finally did share the information, the witness that we just heard says he told them at 10:26 Saturday night. That was at 10:17 Sunday morning, so almost a full 12 hours later. And by this point, we know that 19 Nova Scotians were dead. So there's no explanation that we've been able to get for that delay. As you can imagine, learning this has not gone down well with the victims' families, some of whom are convinced that if the RCMP had shared that information earlier, that their loved ones might still be alive.
Our morning routines have all changed. But the thing is, for too many kids across Canada, going hungry in the morning is still a reality. That's why at Canada Dry Mott's, we've brought back the Buy a Cup, Give a Cup program. For every Mott's Fruit Stations cup you buy, we'll donate a cup made with unsweetened real fruit to Breakfast Club of Canada. And we'll keep donating up to 500,000 times. That's a lot of mornings made a little better with the help of Mott's Fruit Stations, Breakfast Club of Canada, and you.
Around the world, more than 80 women have accused Peter Nygard of crimes ranging from rape to sex trafficking.
He far exceeds Jeffrey Epstein. He far exceeds Bill Cosby. He exceeds anything that I think our world has seen so far.
A pattern of predatory behavior spanning half a century. Nygard denies it all, but now he faces criminal charges.
If this were a poor man, he would have been in jail decades ago. He is hid in plain sight.
Evil by Design, available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
You spoke with some of the families who lost loved ones in that period, overnight into the morning. Let's take a listen to some of what they told you.
Would have been after Mom was killed that they posted that he was in the Glenholm area. It was after she was killed that they posted he was in an RCMP car. It was after. It was all after. I think it would have made a difference for my mother I think it would have made a difference for Lillian Hislop and Kristen Beaton, Joey Weber,
Because why?
Gina Goulet. They failed to give the public the information they needed to stay safe. They failed at that.
I've gone over and over and over again. They didn't release that he was dressed as an officer or in a marked cruiser. If the RCMP had have armed us with the information of who he was and what they knew by 11 o'clock Saturday night, she wouldn't even been on the road. She wouldn't have left the house. You know, me and many other Blue Nosers and Nova Scotians were sitting on the front deck with their firearms, protecting their family. And she'd have been behind me. She'd have been safe.
That's from the Fifth Estate's documentary. Darcy Dobson, whose mother, Heather O'Brien, was killed, and Nick Beaton, whose wife, Kristen, was killed. Nick Beaton joins me now. Nick, good morning.
How's it going?
How are you doing?
Getting by.
When you listen to this, and we heard just a little bit of this, you say that you go over and over and over this moment. I'm sure that you've thought about that morning thousands of times over the last 7 months. Your wife was on the way. Haven't stopped. I mean, she was on her way to see a patient. She was a nurse, and she was going to do the work that she loved to do to help other people out. Did you have any idea that there was danger out there?
I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, if I thought that this was even remotely possible, that my wife would have been home. She'd have been safe with me, where I could have protected her.
You texted her about what was happening as this started to unfold. What did you say in that text?
We were texting and talking, trying to figure out what was going on. And it's right after they released, I won't say his name, the Wart. They released the Wart, and we talked back and forth, and I talked on the phone, and I told her, I learned from residents down in Portapique that he quite possibly could have an old cop car that he was driving. So I told her, I said, if you see one, like, avoid it, stay away from it, do whatever. Like, don't know where he is. They might have him. They've been too quiet for him to be on the loose. Like, they've said nothing. But I said, just to be extra safe, you know, take every preventive measure. Don't pull over for anyone. You know, don't stop. You know, never in God's green earth did I think to tell her not to sit if a cop pulls in, or, you know. And if I'm adamant that if they had have released that he was dressed as an officer and in a cruiser, that you're dealing with a whole different kind of sick there. There's no way she would have been on the road. I would have made her stay at her clients, or I would have went and got her.
And to your point, I mean, you didn't tell her that because you didn't know. But
never dreamt.
After you found out that the RCMP had this information that apparently they weren't sharing with the public, I mean, what was going through your mind then once you learned that they'd had some information?
I'm still pissed off, extremely pissed off. Like, my wife and unborn baby's blood is on the hands of the ones that held that information. They are almost as responsible as that piece of garbage. They had the information to protect a whole community, Nova Scotia. This could have went, if Hottie hadn't slowed him down, the hero that she is, you know, Christ knows how far he would have went with that. If he got down in the city, like, it's just disgusting.
What are the questions that you still have about what happened that weekend?
We don't have enough time in this radio show to talk about that. It's like, why didn't you tell us? You knew before 11 o'clock Saturday night. Why didn't you tell us? You know, like everyone getting up Sunday morning, you know, going for coffee, going for a drive, going to see somebody. No one would have did any of that. You know, they're right quick to warn us about COVID and stay indoors and avoid this area and this and that. But even so, they tweet it. Like, again, I'm on record everywhere saying, who uses Twitter? You know, celebrities. There's not many celebrities around, you know, our parts of Nova Scotia.
Do you think that they could have done much more to try and get that information out there?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Someone robs a liquor store, they got their picture posted everywhere. Do you know this person? It's on social media, Facebook, everywhere.
You're part of this class action lawsuit with other families, and there's an inquiry that is happening now into what happened. What do you hope comes out of all of that?
The biggest thing that I hope comes out of it is that their CMP and anyone involved learn where they made the mistakes to prevent this from happening again. Because I can't begin to tell you the hell that I'm living day in and day out. And no one should have to do that. No one should have to live like that. And me and all the other family members, that's the biggest thing we want is, make changes, see what you did wrong, learn from it. But they still haven't, 7 months later, and there's no changes. I looked the RCMP right in the eye and asked them, if this happened tonight, would you be ready, more ready than you were April 18th and 19th? I guarantee you the answer is no, because they still haven't learned from it.
What's helping you get through this? I mean, I know you said it's like living hell, and it's a day-by-day sort of thing. What is helping you?
My boy. Our boy.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you one thing. I'm still laughing. You played Justin Trudeau there at the start, and he said, you were not alone. Well, I can tell you he hasn't been there for us. I've reached out to him on multiple occasions. I reached out to him 7 times last week and still haven't heard back from him. And same as Bill Blair, same thing. Reached out to all these guys. It's not to talk about the inquiry, nothing like that, and they don't have the time for you. They don't care. They care when it's convenient for them. They got the camera stuck in their face. Me and other family members, we had private conversations, and we feel alone, 100% alone, other than the support of, like I say, the Blue Nosers and the Nova Scotians. Without them, we'd be locked in a closet. Without them, we wouldn't have the inquiry. We had to fight. We've had to fight since April 19th. I've been backed in a corner with my son behind me, fighting everything by myself and the other family members.
I'm so sorry for what you've been through. And I really, it's hard to talk about this. It was hard in April and it's hard now, but it's important to hear what you're still looking for. Nick, take care of yourself.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Nick Beaton's wife, Kristen, was one of the people killed in Nova Scotia that night in April. Gillian Findlay, there are 22 families that are grieving the death of a loved one, and you can hear what Nick is going through and what he's still looking for. It's heartbreaking when you think of where he is and the answers that he still doesn't have.
It's heartbreaking, it's frustrating, it's anger-making. I think you could hear all of that in Nick's voice, and that's what we heard again and again and again, Matt, from virtually all of the families who had loved ones who died that weekend. And, I can't speak for the RCMP clearly. I can't even explain the position that the RCMP is taking because it seems so obvious that even just speaking to these people and telling them what they can know, perhaps they can't tell them everything, but some things they must be able to tell them that would help them piece together, their loved ones' last moments and understand more clearly what happened. That conversation doesn't appear to have happened, or at least not to the satisfaction of these people. So, so it's, you hear the frustration. It's not easy listening. It's not an easy program that we're putting to air tonight to watch, and I say that as a warning. But all these people spoke, some of them for the first time, because they just feel that, the country needs to understand that the process that should be helping them is not, and something's broken here.
7 months later, as Nick mentioned, there are so many questions about what the RCMP did that weekend, not just how they communicated. He's very critical, and we heard this, in April, very critical of their use of Twitter to get the word out, but also how they responded on the ground. The last time the RCMP conducted a press briefing was on the 4th of June. Here is how Superintendent Darren Campbell described what those first officers did.
As dictated by their training, their objective was to locate and to stop that threat. This is exactly what those RCMP first responders were working towards.
Yeah, and the RCMP have been very firm on this right from the beginning. You know, they said that those first responders, and we still don't know how many there were, as I said earlier, did everything that their training and policy told them they had to do. And first and foremost, that means they had to go out in pursuit of the threat. But, you know, Matt, we heard questions about that too. We spoke with witnesses who were in Portapique that night who say that other than seeing 2 or 3 cruisers that remained parked at the entrance to the area, they saw no evidence of a police presence until more than 2 hours later. And that's when the emergency response team eventually arrives. They're based out of Halifax, so it took a while for them to get there. You know, but these people say that if in fact those first responders were out pursuing the threat, they didn't see any evidence of that. We also learned, again from sources, that early Sunday morning the RCMP made a really fateful assumption, and that assumption was that Gabriel Wortman was likely dead. His property was on fire at that point. They thought that they had accounted for all of the vehicles that were registered to him, and those included 3 former police vehicles. They thought those had been accounted for, and they didn't know, of course, at that point, or they didn't put it together, that there was indeed a fourth unregistered car. But they assumed the danger was over. And in fact, sources tell us some officers were even sent home that morning at about 5:30 or 6. Of course, it was only a couple of hours after that again, they started getting reports and calls of other shootings in another part of the province entirely. Gabriel Wortman was very much alive, and his killing spree at that point was continuing.
The RCMP has insisted that the gunman's impersonation of an officer did not play any role in any of the 22 deaths. And there are other people who strongly disagree with that. What did you find?
Well, it's hard. I don't know how the RCMP can say that categorically, because how would they know? You know, the victims are dead. How would they know what the last interactions were between those people and somebody that they assumed, by the way he was dressed and the car he was driving, was a legitimate RCMP officer? You know, we do know that on that Sunday morning, you heard about Kristen Beaton. We heard about the woman who spoke prior to Nick was Darcy Dobson. It was her mother, Heather O'Brien, another nurse who was killed on that same road. After that, there were 3 more victims, all of whom would have seen somebody in an RCMP cruiser. Now, did they stop because that's what people do when they see an RCMP cruiser? Did they stop in the case of a man named Joey Weber that you heard somebody mention his name? He was, when there was the shootout with the legitimate RCMP officers a little bit later. Heidi Stevenson, a constable, was killed, and the vehicles were set on fire. Joey Weber saw a fire. He saw an RCMP vehicle and stopped to help, and he was killed. So, you know, how can anybody say that it played no role? I don't know.
I guess just finally, we heard this from Nick. The families have been fighting to get a public inquiry. How are they feeling about having to fight